Alright, so we are continuing to talk about quadratic inequalities, and we're going to solve this one before us. And in solving it, we're going to follow the 3 steps which are outlined in the textbook, which tell us to solve a quadratic inequality. Step number 1 is to solve the corresponding equation. For example, and then we have set it equal to 0. So I'm going to do my very first step in blue, and I'm going to write it out as an equation by setting it equal to 0, and then I could go, therefore my x is going to equal -3, or my x is going to equal 5. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is to sketch the graph of the quadratic inequality, and as you can see now it's y equals, because I'm going to graph it. So step number 2 will be done in green. I'm going to sketch y equals x plus 3, x minus 5. So I'm going to have an x-intercept at -3 and 1 at 5. Then I'm going to give it a quick sketch. This may not be the best. Up. There we go. It's not perfect, but it will do. So I have my intercepts at -3 and -5 based on the solutions that I got. And of course, and I really should do this because I really should be pedantic, because this is what I expect from you in a test. When you're drawing your intercepts, you're going to write that this is -3 and 0, and this is 5 and 0. My next step, step number 3, is to use the graph to determine the set of x values which satisfy the inequality. So I'm trying to determine the set of x values which will satisfy the inequality. So I come and look at my inequality, which is here, and it's x plus 3, x minus 5 is less than 0. So when will my output be less than 0? Or to think about it in this form, in my quadratic polynomial, when I'm graphing it here, when will my y be less than 0? And it's quite clear it will be less than 0 when it's below my x-axis, just like it always is. My negative y values are below my x-axis. So here is where my inequality will be satisfied. So I could write when x is equivalent to, and I'm going to use square brackets because I have a greater than or equal to sign, -3, and that is going to go all the way to 5. And this right here will be my final solution. X is equivalent to -3 to 5. Let's now move on to my next question, which is here. So again, I'm simply going to follow my rules as I always do. Step number 1 is going to be writing this as an equation. So I'm going to get 5x squared minus 5x minus 150 equals 0. I'm going to divide both sides by 5 to make it a bit simpler for myself to solve for x. I'm going to get that, and this will be 30 equals 0. The next thing I'm going to do is factorize it. So I need some numbers. It's going to be -6 and +5. That checks out because -6 times 5 is -30, and -6 plus 5 is -1, which therefore means my x is going to equal 6, or my x is going to equal -5. My next step will be to sketch it. So I'm going to sketch a graph of it. So it's going to be y equals 5x squared minus 5x minus 150. That is what I'm sketching. I will have an x-intercept at 6, so 6 and 0, and I will have one also over here at -5 and 0, -5 and 0. I'm going to give that a quick sketch. That is a beautiful looking parabola. And then my next step will be determine the x values which satisfy my inequality. I'm looking for outputs which are greater than 0. So if I now think about it in this form, I'm thinking of when I get y values which are greater than 0, or in other words, which are positive. And we know that my positive y values exist above my x-axis, so up here. So therefore my answer will be when x is equivalent to negative infinity to negative 5, including negative 5 because it's an equal sign there, with the union of 6 all the way to infinity. And that will be my answer, negative infinity to negative 5 with a union of 6 to infinity. Let's now go to my next question. And again, you just follow the protocol. Step number 1, I make it into an equation, x plus 2 equals 0. So therefore, x is going to equal 0. That's an ugly looking 0. 0, or x is going to equal negative 2. My next step, number 2 step, is going to be to sketch it. Sketch y equals x plus 2, close my brackets. So it's going to have one here at 0, 0, and my other one is at minus 2, so it's going to be over here, minus 2, 0. I'm going to give that a quick sketch. Oh, I missed it. Oh, that's good enough. There we go. Then my final step, step number 3, is determine the x values which will satisfy my equation. It is less than 0, so it's going to be everything below my x-axis, so everything here. So therefore, my x is going to be equivalent to negative 2 to 0. And again, I have square brackets, negative 2 to 0. Perfect. We now move on to my next question. All right, so again, we follow the protocol. Hopefully you're getting bored by now. It's so easy. So what I'm going to do is set this equal to 0, 5 minus x plus 2 is equal to 0. Therefore, my x is going to be here. It will be 5, or over here, it will be negative 2. Don't get stuck here, because as you see, the minus is in front of my x, which is actually going to make things interesting now when I come to number 2. How will I make things interesting? I'm going to sketch this, but I'm actually going to expand my brackets and show you something that's very interesting. So if I expand my brackets, I'm going to get 5x plus 10 minus x squared, then minus 2x. I, of course, would now write this nicer, minus x squared plus 3x plus 10. I think I've done everything correct there. Yes, that does look good. So now, what do we notice that's funny about this? And hopefully what you notice is that I have a negative here. What is that going to affect? Well, let me write in, this is going to be 5 and 0, and over here will be negative 2 and 0. This negative will mean that it is an upside down parabola. It's going to look like this. That's an ugly looking parabola right there. And then, so I've graphed it. So now when I come to step number 3, determining which x values I have, I said that funny, I'm going to figure out where it is less than or equal to 0. So if it's less than or equal to 0, I'm looking at everything below my x-axis. So it's going to be everything here and everything here. Let me do this nicer here, everything there. So therefore, my x will be equivalent to negative infinity to negative 2, square brackets, the union of 5 to infinity. And there we go. Negative infinity is negative 2 with a union of 5 to infinity. So we had to be careful there of figuring out whether I have an up or down parabola. Let's now do our last question. It's been a long journey, but here we are. Step number 1 is I set it equal to 0, and I'm actually going to rearrange it as well. We always like our x squared being our first term. Then I'm going to get plus x plus 15 equals 0. Immediately what should stick out to you is I have an upside down parabola, but let's not get ahead of ourselves because we still need to solve this for x. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to do some factorizing, and when there's a coefficient in front of it, it's never fun. So I'm going to have to think of two numbers that when I times them together, I get to negative 30. and I got to negative 30 by going minus 2 times 15, and I'm going to have to think of two of the same numbers, which when I plus together, I get 1. So immediately what pops into my head is 5 and 6 give me 30, and if I do 5 and 6, I'm going to get to 1 if I have a minus 5, a minus 5. Minus 5 times 6 is negative 30, minus 5 plus 6 is 1. So now I could come over here and rewrite my equation. It's going to be x squared, then I'm going to get plus 6x minus 5x plus 15 equals 0. So over here, I'm going to take out minus 2x, and what I'm going to be left with is x minus 3 here. And then over here, I'm going to take out minus 5, and what I'm going to be left with is x minus 3 equals 0. Now let me just double check I've done this correctly. Minus 2x times x is negative 2x squared. Negative 2x times negative 3 is plus 6x. Minus 5x times x is negative 5x, and negative 5 times negative 3 is plus 15. Everything looks good here, and I should immediately know I've done it correct because I've got x minus 3, x minus 3, so everything looks good. Now I'm going to move on to my next step. I'm going to get x, negative 2x minus 5, and x minus 3. This is quite the journey that we're on. This is taking some time. So therefore, my x is going to equal negative 5 on 2, or my x is going to equal to 3. So now I will have a 3 here, a 3 and a 0, and over here I'm going to have a negative 5 and a 2. Sorry, I'm going to have negative 5 on 2 and 0. As I said before, this is an upside down parabola, so it's going to look like this. I'm unfortunately going to, like this. And now I'm going to ask myself the question, when is, and this was step number 2, I totally skipped that, wasn't it? Step number 2 is sketching y equals negative 2x squared plus x plus 15. Then my third step is determining my x values. So I know that I'm looking for things that are going to be less than 0. So I'm looking here and I'm looking here. So it's going, and I don't have an equal to sign, so it will be, let me write that again, it will be x is equivalent to negative infinity to negative 5 on 2, open bracket, or circle bracket, whatever it's called, the union of 3 to infinity and beyond. So negative x minus 5 on 2 with a union of 3 to infinity. And there you go. There are all the questions that we have gone through. Hopefully you now understand how to do quadratic inequalities, and this video has been helpful to you in your studies. Thank you, and I'll see you in class.